Welcome back. In this next set of videos, I'm going to talk about assaults. This first one's going to be how do you start the assault. The second video is going to be on how you hit in the assault. And the third video is going to be the other rules in assault. So that's the plan I have for these videos. So who can assault? Well, just like the shooting, it's probably easier to explain who cannot assault. So who cannot assault? Well, let's say this platoon here wants to assault the Germans up here. They're pinned down. So since they are pinned down, oh, it's not going to stay. There we go. Since they are pinned down, this platoon's pinned down, they cannot assault. Another thing is, if they moved at the double, they cannot assault. Now, I will say this. Let's say this platoon, this team here from this platoon moved at the double. Everybody else here moved normally. They were left behind. They're finally catching up, so they moved to double. They will not assault. They cannot join the assault. They still can. So any team member that moved at double cannot assault. I just took the platoon commander out of this, so they have no leader. They cannot assault. They're going to sit tight. Independent teams, such as your spotters, will never assault. Also, the guys with the table, the staff team, they don't want their table hurt. They want to keep their table pristine and nice, so they will never assault. Gun teams will not assault. Now, they will defend themselves when they get assaulted. All these will pretty much defend themselves. There's a few that will automatically run away. But this is who can initiate the assault. So gun teams cannot. And if you look here, I've got a mortar team. They're a gun team. They will not initiate an assault. So they cannot assault. Unarmored tank teams cannot assault. So that would be like your Jeeps. Remember the dash, dash, dash? They will never assault or initiate an assault. Same with your transport teams. They're there to take people around the battlefield, not to go into the battle. So transport teams will not assault. And this again is the tractor for like towing these. So that's a transport team for them. Rocket launchers. So I got this rocket launcher here on the Sherman. This Sherman's a Calliope. It's a rocket launcher. It will not launch an assault. So again, if they're pinned down, anybody that moved at the double, if they're leaderless, if they're an independent team, if they got their table, they're a staff team, unarmored, a transport. Now, German does have a special rule, so be careful about that. But in general, transports cannot assault. And rocket launchers. They cannot launch assaults. So we know that, let's take this back. All right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put their leader back out here. All right, the next step is you pick a platoon or warrior to assault with. Now, remember, warriors could be like your first in command. It could also be special characters like my Audie Murphy here. So they can launch an assault. It's just those independent teams cannot. So warriors can launch an assault. Now, they can go by themselves or they can join a platoon, and I'll get to that in just a minute. But just remember, warriors and your infantry and tank teams can launch an assault. So what you do is, and I'm going to go in more detail about this, but an assault move is basically 4 inches. So you move up to 4 inches, and you want to get in base-to-base contact. And what I mean by base-to-base contact is they're touching. This is not base to base, that's not base to base. They actually have to be touching. That's base to base, base to base. Their bases are touching. So you can move up to 4 inches, and you have to get at least one of the assaulting team members into base to base. If you can't, if they're too far away, in 4 inches takes them to here. Well, they're not in base to base contact. There's a gap. You cannot launch the assault. So you have to be within 4 inches to be able to start the assault. And only one platoon at a time. Or warrior, and I'll get to about warriors joining in a minute. But you can't have also this platoon over here. So I have blue platoon and the white platoon. I can't have both platoons go and assault. Do I want the blue platoon to assault right now? Finish their, resolve theirs. Then I can go to this one. So pick one platoon or warrior to assault with. Now, there is a special situation that could occur, and that is if there's a tank team. If a tank team is within 6 inches of any infantry team from this platoon, they have to take a motivation test to assault. Even though they're not assaulting this tank, it's close enough to them that they're a little bit worried about getting shot at by the tank. They're a big scary beast. So, yep, this is within 6 inches of that. So this whole platoon takes one motivation test, and let's say they're fearless. So we need 3 or higher. Oops, that was cocked. There we go. 1. So they failed. So the assault's not going to happen. There we go. 5. Oh, they were reluctant. They wouldn't make it. 2. So they made their motivation test. The assault can occur, even though that tank is there. So keep that, and it's called tank terror. Now, there is ways to not have to worry about the tank. And that is if it's bailed out. If that tank's bailed out, don't worry about it. You can just go in. You don't have to do any check. If the tank is bogged down, ignore it. Just go charging in. And of course, the last situation, which you probably want to see most of your enemy tanks being, and that is if they are destroyed. So if they're destroyed, you can ignore them. So if the tank's non-functioning, ignore it. There is one other type of tank that you don't have to worry about. And I'm going to remove this, and let's pretend this is a bad guy. But with my priest, I can get a Sherman. That's an observer. It's an independent team. Remember, they can go off wherever they want. Independent teams, you can ignore the tank terror. You don't have to roll, whether functioning or not. Now, if this happens to be a warrior, you do have to worry about it. So basically, if the tank's not working, it's bailed out, bogged down, destroyed, or it's an independent team, you can ignore the tank terror. Check. All right, let me do that. Now I want to go over what's called non-assaulting teams. So there are some teams that could possibly assault that will not. And before you even launch your assault, so you found out, yeah, I'm within 4 inches, there's no tanks there, so they did move it double, I'm going to be able to launch this assault. So before you do that, you have to declare which ones are non-assaulting. And it's pretty much almost the same as who cannot assault. So if any part of this team is out of command, so let's say this rifle team's way over here, and so they're an isolated group, they cannot join the assault. Let's say these guys have a rate of fire 2, and they shot their 2 dice each, well, they did not reduce their rate of fire, whether they moved or not. If they moved, of course, they're going to reduce their rate of fire. If they didn't move and did not reduce their rate of fire, they cannot assault. If they're more than 8 inches away from a defending team, so if they're just basically going to be more than 8 inches away, they're non-assaulting. So if these guys move in, then these guys move in, and these guys move up. And if I really look at who's defending here, these are beyond the 8 inches, so they're a non-assaulting team. And definitely mark that they're non-assaulting, because you will forget. Believe me, you will forget. Again, it's one of those things, mark everything. If they moved at the double, of course, whoever moved at the double will not get to assault. If they are pinned down, of course, they're going to be non-assaulting. Of course, if they're pinned down, they won't be assaulting anyway. The whole platoon is going to be pinned down. If you're a tank team wanting to assault, and it's a tank you want to assault, can't do it. There's no tank-on-tank action in assault in this game. So no ramming each other in this game. So tanks cannot assault tanks. Independent teams. So let me pretend that this guy is part of this platoon. Maybe he's a warrior. Well, not a warrior, but maybe he's something he just joined. He's non-assaulting. So we're going to put a marker on him. Gun teams. Non-assaulting. Remember, they cannot initiate an assault. And if you look here, I've got a mortar team. Well, I better mark that, because there have been times that I forgot to mark them. And they look just like a rifle team if you look at them. They're very, very similar to a rifle team. And when you're in the middle of combat and your brain's kind of going, what do I do? What do I do? Okay, I'm going to do this, and your opponent's doing the same. You will forget. So mark it. It's non-assaulting. So gun teams, non-assaulting. Rocket launchers, non-assaulting. Of course, the staff team with their table. This isn't pro wrestling. They're going to take their table and smash people with it, so staff team won't do that. Another thing that's going to come up is I have this armored vehicle, so it can't assault. However, the opponent on their last turn had this airplane, came in, was trying to shoot up the platoon here. I wanted this platoon to be able to assault, so I had this anti-aircraft shoot at it. Well, since it shot at an aircraft on the opponent's last turn, it cannot assault. So guess what? It gets marked with non-assaulting team. And that's if it wants to try to, if it's part of this platoon wants to assault. Because remember, one platoon. So these are all, some miraculous way, these are all part of this platoon, all this stuff. I'm just giving examples here. So if it's shot, it's anti-aircraft at an aircraft on the opponent's previous turn, it cannot assault. Now, I did say warriors can join an assault. So what I'm going to do is grab Audie Murphy here. Now, Audie Murphy can decide, does he want to go out there, woohoo, all by himself? He can do that. He can go out there and assault by himself. Let me pull these guys back. Let me get that over here so it's out of the way. Pull this out. Okay, so Audie Murphy here can go, you know what, I want to go assault. He can go by himself. He's a warrior. Independent teams, remember, can't do that. They can go out by themselves. They do not launch assaults. So, boom, he goes out. He can do that. Also, I can decide, you know what, I just want this platoon to launch the assault. And Audie just sits there. That's fine. if I want the warrior and them at the same time, I can do that because remember, he can join a platoon. I have to declare that before the assault happens. So I go, you know what? Audie's going to join them. They're going to launch the assault. Now they can launch the assault together. Okay. So you have that choice. So mark the non-assaulting teams. Not in command. It did not reduce their rate of fire. Now remember, vehicle machine guns don't reduce their rate of fire. So don't worry about that. And it's as if you moved, not as if you were pinned. If you're more than 8 inches away from a defending team, if you moved at double, no tank on tanks. They can only charge gun and infantry teams. If you're an independent team, if you're a gun team, a rocket launcher, a staff team, you become a non-assaulting team from that platoon. And warriors must decide, are they going to join that platoon or not when that platoon launches assault. Or you can go solo. So that is that. Let me clear all this out of the way, and we'll go to the next thing. All right, so now we're ready to initiate the assault, and it's what's called charge into contact. And how that works is you find one of your teams that's closest to one of the enemy teams you want to assault. I will say this, I'm going to turn these around so you can see that these guys are blue. And then let's say this platoon up here, which is a different enemy platoon, this red platoon. You can, remember you have to choose one platoon to assault with, but you can assault multiple platoons of the enemy. So it isn't just one platoon versus one platoon. It could be one platoon versus two. So that may go here into this red. That may go to the blue, blue, blue. That's okay. You can do that. As long as they're legally able to assault that platoon. So just don't think that it's one platoon versus one platoon. When you start the assault, you pick one platoon. But you can charge multiple platoons of the enemy. So I'm going to take these guys off. Put these back around. So just keep that in mind. You can do that. And it may be to your advantage to do that. All right, so charging in contact, you pick the closest. Move these guys up for where they should be. Okay. So you pick one of your guys that's the closest to the enemy. So looking at this, I think this is closest to that. So you just move in base to base and rotate them to where they're facing each other like that. Then anybody else that's within 4 inches that can get base to base can go. Okay, he can make it. He can make it. Now, he can make it over here. And I get 2 on that one. Woo! And let's say, actually, there's their commander. I want to take him out, so I'm going to gang up on him. Can't do that. Just like with allocating hits, you have to spread it out. You have to spread out these guys to different enemy teams if they can make it in base-to-base contact. So this one will go there. This one can go there. So I spread out. Now, I started off with closest. Then anybody else that can make it in a base-to-base contact. These are defending teams because I can hit them. So anybody from my attacking platoon that's within 8 inches of them, of these defending, can move 4 inches. So let's see. Yep, that's within 8. That's within 8. That is not. Oh my. And this is within 8. So do you know what we need to do? This team right here can't make it. They are non-assaulting. And if you look very carefully, what are they? They're a man-packed gun team. A gun team. they will not join the assault, so they're out. So that's why it's very important to mark. So now, assaults moves 4 inches, they get to move 4. They can try to move towards a new enemy or towards one that's already in base-to-base contact. So they're going to move forward 4 and 4. All right, so that's how you initiate the assault. It's pretty simple. Closest first. The rest that can actually make it into base-to-base contact, moving 4 inches, spread out best you can, and then move everybody else that's within 8 inches that you want to have assault. That's within 8 inches of a defending team, move them forward 4 inches. Now, there are a few rules about moving. You have to go the shortest route. So I mean straight line, if possible. So if there's nothing in your way, no zigzagging, no going, you just go straight towards the bad guy. If an obstacle's in your way, let's say this impassable terrain here, let's say that's some impassable terrain, and I'm going to move these guys back. The bad guy's around that impassable terrain, and there's just no way with 4 inches, move this guy over, you can make it. You can make it like this, but with 4 inches of movement, you can't. But you know what? With 4 inches, you can make it to that guy. You can do that. So if the terrain's going to prevent you, you can go through it if possible, or the shortest route around it. If this is a bogging check for a vehicle, well, Germans don't want to assault Germans, do they? Here we go, Sherman. All right. So Sherman's like, well, I really want to get these guys. If it wants to go like this, say this is just difficult terrain, so it has to do a bogging check, you have to make the bogging check. Otherwise, it can go, well, I can try to go around if possible. So you got kind of choice. Do you want to go through it or around it? And if you can't reach it, you can ignore that team and go to a different target. You can also, just like normal movement, we get Sherman out of the way. Just like normal movement, come like this. Just like normal movement, I'm trying to get these set up where I can go. Okay, we'll just do this. This guy kind of goes here. This guy is close enough to make it here, but if he goes around, he's going to fall short. You can go through your own teams. So passing through your own teams is okay. And remember that you can go through enemy teams. They can't block you, except for, people and tanks won't go within 2 inches of each other. In assault, you could never pass through an enemy team to get to somebody else. You have to go around them. So if this is here, you can't go, oh, I can reach him now. Woo! Well, wait, no, you can't because you went through. You're gonna have to, you can go through your own guy, but you have to go around the enemy. And you may fall short. Okay? So your own guys don't prevent you from moving through. It's just the enemy does. And like any other time, you can't ever stop on top of any other model. Now, another nice thing about the assault is that if these guys were like spread way out, well, your guys can spread way out and be out of command. If they have to be within 2 inches of each other, they don't have to stay, oh my gosh, I have to be within 2 inches. No. It does not matter about command distance now. They can spread out. These guys are out of command. That's okay. It's an assault. So don't worry about command distance. And as you saw, when you get in base-to-base contact, like the bases are touching, this is the one time in the game that infantry and tanks can get right next to each other. You want to get up close to that tank to destroy it. The tank wants to get close to you to run you over and stuff like that. So this is the one time that these can actually get within 2 inches of each other. There is the gap rule, which I'll bring up a couple of buildings here. Okay, so we got this building. These guys want to assault through to the other side. Well, they only need 1/4 of an inch for these guys to go through, and they're through on the other side, so they're okay. However, this tank wants to assault. Well, there's no way it's going to fit between there, so it can't. It has to go around the building unless it wants to try to crash through and do that skill test. So when you're moving through for an assault, the gap rule still applies. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to move some studs up here. So we got these studs. And I'm going to bring these Shermans out here. There we go. Bring that Sherman, bring this Sherman, bring this Sherman, and this Sherman. Okay. These Shermans can shoot those stugs, but do they have, if they want to assault, are they stuck assaulting those stugs, which they can't because there's no tank on tank? Well, the rule is that who you shoot at, so I'm shooting at this platoon, any enemy team, not platoon, any enemy team within 8 inches of who you shot, you can assault them if you're legally able to. So let's look at this situation. These Shermans shot these stugs. Well, we know they can't go tank on tank, but this platoon is sitting right here. Who can they assault out of this platoon? Well, anybody within 8 inches of these. Well, here's the furthest one over, so that means this team over here is out. So this can't assault there. It basically has to be close enough to your target so they can assault here. Then we're spreading out, so this one's going to go here, this one's going to go here. This one can't reach, but it's within 8. Yep, so it's going to move 4 to here. Totally legal to do that. I could not charge into this one. So you don't have to assault who you shoot. You can. I've done that several times, shooting at a platoon to whittle them down and then come in for the kill. But if you're in a situation like this, I really want to shoot those tanks and take them out, but I also want to try to take these infantry out. This is one way to do it. Shoot the stugs, try to destroy them, and then come in and try to destroy this infantry. So you can do that. All right, I'm going to shut off the camera and get set up for the next thing. All right, next I'm going to talk a little bit about how terrain can affect the assault. The first thing I want to talk, or first type of terrain I want to talk about is linear. And if you go to page 30 of your rule book, I believe it's page 30. Yeah, if you go to page 30 of your rule book, it tells you what type of terrain. So area, 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 linear, area, area, area. So it tells you, and there's open space up here, which is a plowed field, and then building down, way down towards the bottom of the building, which of course is a building. So it tells you what type of terrain the model is. So like this, oops, you can't even see it. There we go. Fence, linear. Hedgerow, or shrubs like this. That's the linear. Stone wall. That's linear. Now for assault purposes, and really shooting too, a building wall is linear terrain. Of course, it's only in this situation, this isn't all linear terrain right there. Just this right here. And one other piece of linear terrain that you may not think about. Let me get it set up here. The other type of linear terrain you may not think about is a destroyed vehicle. So those are some of your basic types of linear terrain. So how does this, actually I shouldn't say a building, I should say the opening in a building. That was bad wording on my part. So let me get a building here. So no opening. It's considered not really linear terrain. You have to have an opening. So just keep that in mind. So how does this affect the assault? Well, I'm going to get this fence here. So we got this fence. We got the German on one side. And the American rifle team here wants to assault them. That's where they got. Because remember, you can't stop on top. They didn't have enough movement to get around. They had to go straight line right towards the enemy. This is it. Well, this is in between them. They are actually not touching each other because that fence is in between them. Well, in assault, when you're in linear terrain, you're considered to be in contact with each other. When you're in contact with the linear terrain, like this. So if this terrain feature prevents you from actually getting these models to touch each other, they're actually considered to be in base contact. If I move this back a little bit, so there's a little bit of a gap. Here, let me move this down. There's a little bit of a gap here between the fence and those Germans. And they have enough movement that they could get, but you know what? They would be on top of the fence. They could stop there. If they're within 2 inches, they're considered to be in contact with each other because this is preventing them from being a base-to-base. If this was gone, they would normally be able to do that. But because of the short gap between here, and they can't stop on top of this linear terrain, they're considered to be in contact with each other. All right, let me clear this off for the next part. All right, let's look at this situation. This is not impassable terrain because he's on it, so maybe it's a slow going or some kind of check, but there's a bad guy up there, and this wants to assault. Well, it can make it in base contact, but there's no way it can stay up there. So what do? Well, you move as close as you can to the bad guy, and if you're within 2 inches, which they are, you count as being in contact with each other. So that's pretty much as simple as it gets. Do not let the terrain, keep you from having an assault. Because if you had enough movement to reach them, get as close as you can, within 2, you can initiate the assault. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next item. All right, let's look at this situation. We've got these tanks are assaulting the Germans in these woods. Well, we know woods require a bogging check, but who in this has to make the bogging check? Well, this one's contacting somebody that's in the woods, so yes, a bogging check. And it rolled a 1. So this one became bogged down. This one's contacting a bad guy in the woods, so 6, it's okay, it can assault. This one's not in contact, but it's within 2 inches of this one. Even though it didn't enter the terrain, it's fighting somebody that's in the terrain. It has to do a bogging check, and it's okay. Now it can roll its dice to assault. One way around that is the situation. If there is a bad guy from the platoon you're assaulting within 2 inches of you that's not in that terrain you have to do those checks, then you don't have to do a check at all. You assault. Has to do a bogging check? Does not have to do a bogging check. So if you're attacking, that's the only people you can attack is what's in the terrain, you're going to have to do a bogging check when you initiate the assault. Okay. This one, there's somebody out here. He may have been over here, just couldn't make it to them. But they're out of the terrain, they're in. These guys are keeping him from having to do that bogging check. All right, now we're going to move on to what happens when we charge into buildings. All right, so first we're going to talk about infantry charging a building. So you basically will go through an unoccupied opening. And if we look here, we have bad guys on this side. So these openings here are occupied. These are not. You know, there's some more around the other side. So we can come in the building from these openings, not from this. Now, if you actually want to enter the building and you have not already started this turn or this step, the assault step, with somebody in contact with that. So they were all back here. They're moving up. You have to do the checked, unchecked building. So they're going to do their training level. They need a 4+ and 3. So they won't go in. Now that means that anybody else that's following can't go through the opening. They'll have to go through another, have to do another check. And let's pretend they got a 5, so they're able to go in. Now, anybody else from that platoon except for them can go in this building, like maybe some of the upper floors. Now, if, let's say they're turned this way, so there is no way, with them turning this way, that you can get one of your teams in there. Well, basically, in that situation, you just move up to the opening, and you're going to fight for that opening. And this is where this becomes linear terrain. This terrain's preventing them from actually getting in contact with each other. There's an opening in between. They're actually considered to be in contact with each other. Let's move this a little bit like this. Now, if there's no opening, no space, like this, so you're coming along and you're in this building and move up here. Well, there's an alleyway between them. That's what they call an alleyway. There's no way you're not allowed to do that, you know. But there's an opening here and an opening there, and you're not allowed to do that. You just stay here, and you're considered to be in contact with each other if you're within 2 inches of each other. So again, don't let the terrain prevent the assault from happening. Try to do your best to allow the assault to happen. So as long as you can get within 2 inches, you're okay. Another one would be, these guys were coming up and they can't fit in the alleyway, so they can be back here at the alleyway. They're considered to be in contact. They couldn't make it there in the alleyway and stop, so they stopped at the alleyway. They're within 2 inches. There's openings here. They can do the assault. All right, next we're going to look at what happens with tanks assaulting people in a building. All right, so we've got this Sherman that wants to assault this building. There's not assault the building, but assault the guys in the building. To do that, they don't need an opening. So if we look at like this building here, there's no opening there. If there was a bad guy in here and these guys want to assault, there's no opening there. They can't assault. They have to go to like the opening over here or something. Tank makes its own openings, so it can assault where there's no opening. Now, whether or not there's an opening or not, the tank has to take a skill check to assault somebody in the building. So these guys are trained, so 4 or higher. Move this back a little bit. And got a 4, so he's able to assault. If he would have rolled like a 1, yes, it becomes bogged down. And then pretty much the same rules apply. You know, if there's the alleyway and they can't reach them, if there's no room to go, you know, they can't actually get in the building because of how these guys are laid. You know, set up in here, get as close as you can, take a check to make sure you're okay, and so forth. So those same rules apply as it does for infantry. Just try to get as close as you can and be within 2 inches. Now, a situation might arise where these guys are on the 2nd floor. Well, this can attack anybody on any floor, basically above it. They don't go upstairs like infantry would. They stay on the bottom floor and attack the people above them. So that's okay. All right, we're going to see what happens if you don't make it in to get your assault. All right, so the situation here is these Shermans charged into contact with the bad guys here. They had to do a bogging check, and they both failed. So they both became bogged down, so that platoon became bogged down. What happens? Well, you pretend that they made it into contact, and these guys get to do their defensive fire, which I'll get to in the next video, or maybe this one. So they conduct their defensive fire. It's going to be this video. They conduct their defensive fire, and then, if possible, they can counter assault. So just because you bogged down or bailed out or whatever doesn't prevent the enemy from getting their defensive fire on you and counter assaulting you. So just keep that in mind, and if your assault totally fails at the very beginning, that doesn't prevent the enemy from trying to hurt you. All right, we're going to talk about what happens if who you're assaulting is gone. What do you do? All right, here's the situation. We've got this American platoon wanting to assault this German platoon. So you let your opponent know that you're wanting to assault, because it's going to eliminate a lot of problems by doing that. So these guys are now shooting at the reduced rate of fire, and boy, your opponent just rolled horribly, and all those died. What do you do in this situation? You were going to assault there, but now they're just too far away. They were in range of your assault before. So what you want to do is, as they are removed, so you know you're going to assault this, as they're removed, mark where they were at. And I'm just using pennies here. So these 4 died right there. Now you know where you can assault to. So you do your normal. Okay, closest to closest. You know, I think it's going to be this. That one can make it to there. So can that one. This one can make it to here. So you're basically assaulting where they were at. Done. Now, I'll move this one a little closer. If there's an enemy team from that platoon or whatever that you were charging within 2 inches of one of your teams, you can do your assault. And we'll get to how that happens. The assault range is basically 2 inches. So you can assault that. They also get to do their defensive fire. So don't think, before that assault happens, and we'll get to defensive fire, they still get to conduct their defensive fire. So don't think just because they're gone, you're not going to take any shots from them. If it's possible, they're going to shoot back at you. Then if you survive and you're within 2 inches of the bad guy, the assault happens as normal. If the enemy is more than 2 inches from you, so now this happens to be more than 2 inches, yep. So I'll move this one back. So now the rest of the platoon is not within 2 inches of them. You cannot conduct any hits. They get to do defensive fire, and they get to do a motivation test to come at you. And we'll get to that about counterattacking. Now, if there is a stipulation of this, if you assaulted in there and there's no enemy team within 4 inches of you, and they conducted their defensive fire and you survive, so now these guys are more than 4 inches away, you won the assault. So if they're within 4, the assault still goes on. If they're within 2, you get to actually attack in the assault. Within 4, they have to do their motivation to counter assault. If they're beyond 4, they still get their defensive fire. You won the assault, and you get to consolidate. And we'll get to all that in the later videos, but I just want to let you know that their opponent just can't. And I've seen this in some games where you're like, okay, I'm going to charge into these guys. Okay, they're not in range of your assault now, so you can't assault, so you're going to sit there and I'm just going to blow you up. Can't do that in this game. If your intention was to assault, you get to go where they were at, if it was legally possible. And that's why now they are marked. You get to move in. Do you get to score hits? Does the assault continue, or is the assault over? So don't think that people can just remove who you're shooting at to keep you from assaulting. All right, so now we're going to move to who is actually a defender in the assault. All right, let's look at this situation. And what I did was I turned the German bases around. So we've got a red platoon, a blue platoon, and a platoon of Stugs, and these are the assaulting Americans. So who would be the defending platoon in this? Well, it's kind of a trick question because it's actually platoons. The rule is, after you're done finished all your charge into contact moves, any enemy platoon within 8 inches of an assaulting team is considered a defending platoon. So, of course, the red, they're going to be. The Stugs, definitely within 8 inches. So this Stug platoon is a defending platoon along with the red one. And, of course, the blue is within 8 inches of an assaulting American rifle team. So they are a defending platoon. So every one of these is considered a defending platoon in this assault. Now, let's say that the company commander is here. He's a warrior. Warrior, if he's within 8 inches of an assaulting team, so he is definitely within 8 inches of this assaulting team, he must, if possible, join a team. Now, he can join the blue ones if he wants to for the assault. He can join them, he has to try to join them before those, because he has to join like team first. So he may go to the blue team. He has to join if possible. It has to be a friendly platoon. He can't join the assaulting platoon, of course. So that's basically how you tell who the defending platoons in an assault will be. After you're done doing your movement, any platoon within 8 inches of the assaulting platoon is a defending platoon. And if there's a warrior out there within 8 inches of an assaulting team, they have to, if they can, they have to join another platoon. All right, so what we're going to talk about a little bit now is we charge into combat, or charge into, not combat, charge into contact with the enemy. We found out who the defending platoons are. But before the assault happens, the bad guys here get to do what's called defensive fire to try to prevent them from coming in. And you do this after all the charge into contact moves are done. And basically, anybody within 8 inches of an assaulting team can conduct defensive fire. So if we measure, and let's say the stug was up there, well, it's more than 8 inches away, so it cannot conduct defensive fire. The rest of these could. Yep, they're all within 8 of this assaulting platoon, so they could conduct defensive fire. That one could not. Now, there are a few stipulations. Again, if you moved at the double, no defensive fire for you. If you are, I just put the model down I was going to use for this demonstration. Okay, well, oh, there they are. Okay, this right here, we're going to pretend this is a flamethrower. Flamethrowers cannot be used in defensive fire. But just like any other team, like a bazooka team, a gun team, and so forth, they can instead shoot as a rifle team. So they can still do defensive fire, just not use their flamethrower. They'll shoot as a rifle team. Now, it's the normal procedures. Are they in the line of sight? Are they in your field of fire? So remember, if the enemy gets behind this front, they can't use this gun, so they can switch to rifle, and then they got 360. So it has to be in your field of fire, and range is different. 8 inches maximum. That's why I said this stug out here is too far away. And whether they moved or not, they get their full rate of fire. However, if the unit is pinned down, they do reduce their rate of fire for defensive fire. So if these guys aren't pinned down, they're going to get, in their rifle machine gun, they get 2 shots each, 2, 4, 6. They're going to get 6, 8 shots coming at these guys. If they're pinned down, 4. So I'll give you this hint. If you're going to assault, pin the unit you want to assault. Pin them down. You check for concealment after the charge is done. So if it's this, well, they're considered base, no concealment, but this one, oh, I think it's going to get concealment there. So you can get concealment, but you check after you're done charging into contact. There is no bulletproof cover, though. Oh, I shouldn't say that. That's the assault. So check if concealed. If you're in the woods or building, you're still concealed. If shooting through smoke, so let's say these guys threw down some smoke here. These guys are shooting through the smoke. They're considered concealed, but not gone to ground. Because remember, this gives you both. On the assault, it does not give you the gone to ground. So it just makes it one harder to hit you, but that's one harder to hit you. All right, who can be hit? Basically, only the assaulting teams can be hit. So if this one here is a non-assaulting team, it's not going to be shot at. They're worried about these guys coming at them. These guys are hanging low. So the shots will be allocated to those coming in. So if you're coming in with very few troops and you're getting a lot of fire coming at you, you may not make it to the assault. And the normal allocation rules apply. You know, spread them out and so forth. Now, I was right. In defensive fire, you get no bulletproof cover, period. Just, you do get concealment, but no bulletproof cover, so no firepower test needed. Now, tanks in defensive fire can use their machine guns. However, they can't use these. These are hull mounted. It has to be turreted mounted weapons. So their machine guns plus any turreted mounted weapons can be shot in defensive fire. So this one can only shoot its machine guns. This can shoot its machine guns and the main gun for defensive fire purposes because it's a turreted weapon. And next I'm going to set up for, what about trying to get where like a tank doesn't shoot at you? Is there a way to do that? Yes, and I'm going to talk about sneaking up on tanks. All right, we got this situation where these thugs moved up this as far as they get. They're not close enough to assault, and they tried to shoot up this platoon last turn. So now it's the Americans' turn, and they want to assault these tanks, but man, they're going to have 9 dice coming at them. Like, oh man. And so they're like, what do we do? Well, if you're concealed, so your infantry is concealed, and basically they did nothing that turn. If they did not move in the movement step or shoot in the shooting step and started its charge into contact from concealed, so these guys are concealed in the woods. I have some in the building there also. So they're concealed. So if you didn't move, didn't shoot, and you start from a concealed position, you can charge into contact and they get no defensive fire on you. Now, anybody else like infantry teams or something like that out here will, but they won't. And you'll just move closest to closest, of course, and there, and then this guy can come out to here. And guess what? No defensive fire on them from these tanks because they snuck up on them. These guys only have a small port to look out of, so their field of vision is very narrow. So if you sit tight, you can sneak up on a tank without it shooting at you. So that's how you can sneak up on tanks. Now, if let me set it up for the next thing. I was thinking about doing this, but hold on for just a second. All right, in this situation, this is the assaulting platoon. This is the defending platoon. So they charge into contact. And now they get to conduct defensive fire. Well, they got rifles. That is going to do the anti-tank 2. That's going to do nothing to these thugs. What you do is you are going to be shooting the side armor. So again, the right side armor on this, I think it's like a 3. It's more than its anti-tank, so the rifle can't do anything. But if you notice, there's some bazookas in there. anti-tank 10 on side armor. If they hit, they can't make a save. So in defensive fire, your shots on tanks go against side armor, not front. So just keep that in mind. Especially like these bazookas. Wow, that's going to make trying to charge into these bazookas, teams with bazookas and stuff, really, really dangerous for tanks. If they pin them down, it's going to make it harder for them to hit those studs. So just remember, if you're shooting at tanks in defensive fire, they do not get to use their front armor. It's the side armor. Now let's reverse the story here. These Americans are assaulting the studs instead. So they charged into combat. These did their defensive fire, and they're going to get 9 dice. So, and they're out in the open, trained, so it's going to take 3s to hit. And wow, they didn't even miss at all. If they get hit 5 times or more, not killed, just hit. It's like that pinning situation. The fire's too heavy, they have to fall back. So the assault's not going to happen. It was prevented by the fire of the enemy. And they fall back and they will be pinned. Now, what that means by falling back is all teams within 2 inches of an enemy team must immediately move the most direct route away from them until they're 2 inches away. So this one has to move at least right there. Uh-oh. It's on top of it, so this one has to scoot back. This one, oh, gonna have to scoot back a little bit. This one, you know what? It's getting on top of both those. Kind of have to scoot those back. And this one's going to go there. Now they're beyond the 2 inches. They're going to make their saves as normal from these hits, but the assault does not happen. They prevented the assault from happening. So if infantry take 5 or more hits, not kills, hits, they back up 2 inches, they face the enemy. If the team was in the way like this was, they have to move back to give them room. If it's a tank that's going to have to fall back, and I'll talk about how a tank's going to have to, because it's not 5 hits on a tank. And this is also on, unarmored vehicles won't assault, so don't worry about that. So there's that. If these guys had to fall back because what I'm going to talk about, and they're going through terrain, there's no bogging check. They just move back. If they are bailed out or bogged down when they came in, within 2 inches of the enemy, during the charge into contact or by some defensive fire, they fall back until they are 2 inches away. And they're still bailed out. But the bogged down situation may not happen. Now, let me get a bailed out and a bogged down marker here. Okay. So, give me my little bush here. There we go. Got my shrubbery. All right. So, this required a bogging check. It made it over. This came in, they shot at defensive fire and bailed it out. I don't know how I got those to stand up. There we go. Bailed out. They have to pull back, and I'll get to how tanks have to pull back. So they pull back. This one pulls back 2 inches. This one doesn't have to take another check. It just pulls back. Now, if it goes over, let's say to here, and it became bogged down, and it's within 2, so it has to move back, and that's going to put it where it's not crossing that. That's gone. So if it was bogged down, but it has to move that 2 inches away, and it takes it out of what bogged it. It's no longer bogged down. They do remain bailed out, though, because that was from the fire. Now, how do these poor guys stop them from coming in? We saw how they get stopped. 5 hits, they pull back. Well, what about a tank? How do they stop these tanks from coming in and assaulting them? Basically, it's what they call 2 effective hits. If the vehicle either gets destroyed or bailed out or is destroyed. If 2 or more, and it's any combination, 2 bailed out, 2 destroyed, 1 bailed out, 1 destroyed, 2 or more of those happen, they're going to fall back. So that takes 5 hits to do here, 2 that's going to take out the tanks. Either bailed out or destroyed. Well, our combination. So I shouldn't say or, and or. All right, I got one last thing to talk about. So I'm going to clear this off. Oh yeah, before I go on, remember that 5 hits, like here, they took 5 hits, they tried to go in, they took 5 hits, and they fall back, they are pinned. I forgot to tell you, please don't forget, they took 5 hits, they're pinned. Of course, armored vehicles ignore pinned, so don't pin them. So don't forget that if they took those 5 or more hits, they are pinned. All right, here's the situation. The Americans are going to assault the Germans. So they go in, and this is as far as they can, they go there 4 inches up, and as far as they can make it. They conduct their defensive fire, and boy, do they take, and they just, let's say that's what they destroyed, okay? Are there any assaulting teams within 2 inches of the enemy team? No. The assault is over. The assaulting teams, become pinned down. And that's it. The assault is over. They prevented, so there just wasn't enough men to make it to it. Now, one way this won't apply is if, let me get markers for this, is if you were assaulting abandoned position. Then that's okay. So, if you were not assaulting abandoned position and nobody's left within 2 inches, the assault is over. If you're assaulting an abandoned position, oh, and they became pinned. If you're assaulting an abandoned position, you kind of ignore that rule. All right, so that's all I've got for this video. The next one is, okay, we charged into contact, I keep saying combat, charged into contact with enemy. How do we hit? So that will be the next video. So again, as always, have a good game.